Let me now turn to our final speaker, Mr. Acharya. As I pointed out earlier in my remarks, we would very much value your reflecting of what's new and what are the emerging global partnerships in the post-2015 development agenda, and what implications these have for our special needs countries. So over to you, Mr. Acharya.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary. I think we have heard very extensively the importance of development cooperation from among all the participants. I think these are very informative. Before going into the new partnership, I'd just like to say a couple of words on the old one, I mean the traditional one as well, because there is an organic relationship between the development cooperation and many of the new resources that we are talking about. Yes, there is a very big concern at the global level that, as you said in the beginning, the international commitment on ODA has not been fulfilled, and we are nowhere near fulfillment of that. It is just half. I mean, there has been some improvement this year, 2013. There is a small uptick. Still, it is $135 billion, which is 0.3. We are just in the half mark for the development cooperation. That's a constant concern. Now, when you hear all the comments and when you try to see that from the lens of the post-2015 development agenda and compare that with the MDG progress, now you see the whole gamut of areas that we are trying to cover at the international level. If you look at all the countries, LDCs, small islands, and the LLDCs, the progress in MDG have been very limited. So there is a long way to go in terms of the health, education, and poverty alleviation, and hunger, and all that. That will still occupy a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and a lot of attention among the LLDCs, and SIDS. Secondly, when you look at the post-2015 development agenda, we have now added the economic growth pillars, which includes infrastructure, that is what we are talking about, industrialization, and then, of course, access to energy, which is a very important issue for all these countries that has not come out, and then the high cost of building energy facility, building infrastructure, and building productive capacity, or whether you call it productivity enhancement. And the Minister of Cambodia was talking about the factories and then the markets. And the third, of course, we have to do in a way that we also protect our natural capital and then also deal with the climate change and other impacts. That means the area that we are trying to cover by post-2015 is going to be much wider and much deeper than before. And two, the capacity of the countries and the resource of these countries is very limited. Therefore, ODA commitment will be critical for all these countries, because when you look at the resource generation in the LDC, we have that statistics. Average revenue from the tax is about 12, 13, 14% of total revenue, GDP, and that's very, very low. And then when you look at the gap, the investment gap, and which at least if you need to really have a 7% growth rate for LDCs or similar growth rate, you need at least 25, 30% of the investment, and you don't have that. So their dependence on ODA will continue to remain for the time being. But when I say that, when you look at the agenda of the post-2015, the requirement would be much higher than what we have now. Even if ODA is fulfilled, then in terms of the the resources from 135 billion, maybe it will be, as I said, $300 billion. But when you look at the requirement, the infrastructure building we have heard, the vulnerability that we have heard from the SIDS countries, especially when they have to deal with the impact of the climate change and the ocean acidification. And then we have heard the challenges of productive capacity building, and then, of course, the economic growth and infrastructure and access to energy. The requirement would be so much that the ODA will not be enough. Therefore, I think what we discussed in the post-2015 is that even for the least developed countries, even for the small islands, even for the landlocked developing countries, we have to look at technology issues, we have to look at investment issues, we have to look at trade issues, and we have to look at the multi-stakeholder global partnership. And the PPP is part of that as well, and as well as the South-South cooperation. All need to be really strengthened, enhanced, and made coherent so that each will support the other. I think that's the key to our discussion for making the post-2015 development agenda more successful. Now, we talk about green economy, we talk about protecting our resources, finding a new way of dealing with all of that, low carbon and all of that, the greener economy. How can we do that if we don't have the necessary mechanism to have access to new technologies? It cannot happen. So there has to be a way to make sure that the technology, innovation, and science plays a very important role in the new economy that we are all aiming at. But the capacity constraint is limited, and the transfer of technology is very much limited. There has to be a way to deal with that. So the post-2015 must ensure that the mechanism is there, it is supported, it is helped by the international community for these countries. Secondly, we talk about investment. Yes, I was just looking at some of the statistics. LDCs, one example I'm just giving, same thing applies to the LLDCs as well as the small island developing states. LDCs have 900 plus million people. There are 48 countries. The total in investment last year, the year before, was just $20 billion. Now you can imagine, and if you take the 5 countries out, the natural resources, the country rich in natural resources, I'm thinking of Mozambique, Angola and all of that, then what are you left with? 43 countries, $10 billion is invested. That's not enough. Therefore, what we are discussing in New York and many other capitals is that what could be the other ways to incentivize FDI going into these countries? What are the modalities? Is there ODA which can leverage? Is there blending that we can do it better than before? Is there a way that the home country measures in the developed country themselves can look at the modalities whereby they will take part of that, the part of the risk related to going into these markets? I think that's the way. If the risk has to be minimized, enabling environment, of course, these countries have to create. There has to be a better development of the private sector. We heard that. There has to be a better development of the rules and regulation, transparency, good governance. They are very important. But even if you have all the facilities given, look at the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS countries' investment regimes. They are most welcoming. They are most liberal. But still, you think about the statistics, and this is very, very low. Therefore, what we are really trying to look at is that how best we can use the ODA, how can we use the mechanisms, create a new mechanism whereby they can also incentivize and they can also make sure that the home country measures are taken to promote the investment. I think that would be another one. And then finally on the trade sector, of course, we have again heard that when you look at the capacity of these countries, there is a limited supply side and productive capacity. That is one challenge. But even if they have whatever supply side and the productive capacity, the market access is a big issue, the rules of origin are a big issue, non-tariff measures are a big issue, and of course, lately, of course, especially when you look at the opening of the, the implementation of the DF-QF level is very much limited for these countries. Now, only 83%, 84% market is given to them. So, finally, I would like to say that what we are therefore really looking at in the post-2015 is that we have to take all these resources together. We have to use the private sector. There is a lot of money out there. They have to really make full use of in order to bring about a change. Requirement is big, but there are opportunities. We have to deal with the systemic issues, and we have to make sure that they are coherent, and we have to have a strong monitoring and accountability so that we just don't go the way that we have been going on with the MDG. There will be a real change in the lives of people, everyone, but of course those who are in the least developed, landlocked, and the small island developing states must. Thank you very much.